we are going to be sharing with you what I think is maybe the worst pharmaceutical commercial of all time. And that's a big statement, but I think it's true. These companies are integrating lab tests because they know with that data plus the lab data, they're going to have an extremely powerful understanding of your health over time. But ultimately, it does say to me that for most practitioners, you need to get your act together with regard to the way that you deal with data. The synergy of lab data and other biometric data is really going to unlock a lot of understandings about how people live and how people heal. Hello and welcome to the second episode of the second season of the Evolution of Medicine podcast. I'm your host, James Maskell, and this week we are going to dive into some of the critical conversations happening at the future of functional, integrative, and precision medicine. I'm so glad you're here. Later on, we are going to be sharing with you what I think is maybe the worst pharmaceutical commercial of all time. And that's a big statement, but I think it's true. And you can help me judge if you think it's true too. And we're also going to be showing you the most popular video in the history of the Functional Forum. We have over 11 years of content. I went through the whole YouTube channel to see what was the most compelling, what was the most interesting, what was the most watched video of all time. And I'm super excited to share that with you a little bit later. But first, we're going to jump in to the news. And one of the biggest things that affects the functional medicine, the integrative precision medicine community right now is the massive growth in direct-to-consumer lab testing. When I started in this industry 20 years ago, the only way that you could access the kind of information that would tell you what is at the root cause of your chronic health complaint was via a practitioner, because the whole industry was essentially through the doctor. And that just mimicked the way that medicine was developed. Now, ultimately, over the last 10 years, we've seen the consumerization of medicine. And so consumers being able to get the care that they want directly. And ultimately, one area that this is showing up massive right now all across the industry is in consumer-based lab testing. And so what I want to do now is just share with you, some of the organizations that are delivering this. So one that you're probably very familiar with already is Function Health. And Function Health was created by Dr. Mark Hyman, Jonathan Swerdlin, and others. And ultimately, the promise of Function Health is to give you over 100 lab biomarkers for $499 a year. And ultimately, this is something that I think is really interesting. Back in 2018 or 2017, we launched a service called New Health that became an alternative to health insurance. The first thing that we did was to make it easy for patients to access their own labs and to really understand some of that basic information. So this is sort of taking that to the next level. And this is extremely popular, extremely well marketed. And I think that if there's one thing that it can teach the whole functional medicine community is that labs is a great top of funnel for understanding how to bring people into your practice. People want this. 200,000 people have bought it, and it doesn't include any real medical interpretation. There's a lot of AI interpretation, but this is something that I know when I speak to practitioners, many practitioners are experiencing people signing up for Function Health, getting the information, feeling a bit confused and coming into them. And that has been the situation up until now. I would say that in the future, I think that Function Health will look to own the whole customer experience. And that might mean that those patients will then be choosing between Function Health and your clinic. But that's, in the future. At this moment, I think it's a good way to get a lot of information for a low price. Now, there's another company that you should be aware of called Superpower. And Superpower has been around a little bit less time. It's newer, but it's very, very similar. In fact, at the very beginning, the advertisement that you've probably seen all over social media was exactly the same. 100 plus biomarkers, $499. In the last month, it is now less than $200. So now they're saying it's only $17 a month. So, what you have to understand is that this is the game of VC-backed companies, right? They create an artificially low cost so that you'll use it because they want to acquire members, and then eventually, they're going to get more of your dollars from you. And you've seen it with Uber. You've seen it with all the delivery things like Grubhub. The first thing that they do is to, grab market share and then sell you more things. Superpower is very cheap. There is no way that this business is making money on that first sale, right? Because for $200 a year, I'm not sure if you could even organize all those labs. I'm sure you can't. And so, this is really about using the large amount of VC money to bring in more and more members, and then ultimately, to try and get lifetime engagement. But with both of these services, you're having, long-term data, you're getting longitudinal data, and starting to see the amount of information that's coming in. Now, there are some very new players to this space of selling lab tests that I want to make you aware of, because I think this is even bigger news for our community. So Whoop recently, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with Whoop, Whoop has just launched a new service which sells labs as well. It's called Whoop Advanced Labs. And you can see here on the site, every biomarker is chosen for impact: hormones, heart health, sleep, inflammation, fitness, metabolic health, nutrients, cognitive performance. So again, Whoop allows you to book into Quest Diagnostics. All of these companies are just really sort of a wrapper on top of either Quest or LabCorp. So it allows you to schedule a test. This one is particularly with Quest. So you can go in and there, get your information. Now, the reason why this is really interesting is because the synergy of lab data and other biometric data is really going to unlock a lot of understandings about how people live and how people heal. And so Whoop is really going end to end. Like, Whoop doesn't integrate with any other tools. It doesn't allow its API to be used. So Whoop is really looking to create a whole health technology stack. And this is going to be in competition one way or another with, the functional medicine clinic, because ultimately this is doing something very similar than practitioners do, which is to gather information, to understand what's working, and to really build something that gives patients real time understanding of their health over time. And Whoop has been the leader in the sort of fitness band and now going into labs. And one other you should know about is Aura. So Aura Ring, probably familiar with it. It's been out for almost 10 years now, but now they have health panels at Aura. What does this look like? So they're saying Aura's approach is accessible, personalized, and integrated. So now it's comprehensive, it's clear, there's a personalized context, and it's shareable to your doctor. So ultimately, again, Aura, multi-billion-dollar company, the Aura Ring is the sort of leading wearable. And now these companies are integrating lab tests because they know with that data plus the lab data, they're going to have an extremely powerful understanding of your health over time. And so one of the things that I want to share is that I believe in the power of the patient-practitioner relationship. I came to functional medicine because I recognize that something really powerful happens with the human part of medicine. And ultimately, that's why I'm here, supporting the practitioner-patient relationship through supporting the integrative and functional medicine community to build successful practices and to be able to help people reverse chronic illness. The state of chronic illness is so bad that I think all of these things are going to be a sort of a net positive to those people who use them. But ultimately, it does say to me that for most practitioners, you need to get your act together with regard to the way that you deal with data, because the idea that in a few years' time, you would be able to do it the way you're doing today, where you have a few PDFs and you're looking at them and you don't have any idea what's happening with people in between their appointments. You don't have any way to understand what's going on. How are the things that you're recommending affecting their health in the short run, medium, long run? It's just going to be uncompetitive in the new world. And so that's why, we have brought together, mission partners to help build this, practice network of the future, because we believe that, you are going to, have to catch up with this. And, in that spirit, I wanted to mention, one of the groups that we've been part of for a long time, Fullscript. Fullscript is completely committed to the success of practitioners. That's the only business they're in. They only work with practitioners. There's 120,000 customers that use them. Ultimately, very soon you will see that Fullscript will make it easy for you to do exactly this, to create labs, to send those labs to patients at regular intervals, and to create longitudinal data for your patients. And so we are very excited and grateful to have Fullscript as one of our mission partners, because we believe that, it's going to take B2B technology that you use in your practice to make an impact and to, help you compete with these kind of tools so that you can maintain market share, grow a business, and have the impact of functional medicine grow significantly. So if you're not aware of this, I just wanted to make you aware of this. And look, even LabCorp is doing it. LabCorp, which has always been sort of B2B for business to business and, making it easy for clinics to get their lab testing done. You can now go to LabCorp directly and order directly from LabCorp. And I'll show you the site here now as well. If you haven't checked that out, LabCorp On Demand, women's health tests, complete blood count, all of these things can be purchased with cash and executed directly. And this is the sort of the middle of the end game of the consumerization of healthcare, in that the consumers can choose what they want. And ultimately, will they choose to want to have a functional medicine doctor? Will they choose to want to engage consistently with a clinician? Or will they use some of these other tools? So those are the questions that we're going to have to answer. So that is the news section. And I hope that, share this with someone. If you've had these kind of conversations at conferences, you think this is interesting, if you use an Oura Ring or if you use a Whoop, why not sign up and see what that experience is like so that you can understand, the people who are getting excited about health in your community, what are the tools and services that they are likely to use. So this has been the news. Now we're going to get into a segment that I'm pretty excited about. And what I think I found is the worst pharma commercial of all time. And that is a big statement. So I remember watching this. It came out in 2015. And what we'll do is let's watch a little bit of it. And then I'm going to comment on it at the end. And then we can watch a little bit again just to see how disingenuous the whole thing is. So this is called Big Bad Cough. It's put out by GlaxoSmithKline. And it was a commercial that came out in 2015 for the whooping cough vaccine. So let's take a look.
There's something out there. It's a highly contagious disease. It can be especially serious, even fatal to infants. Unfortunately, many people who spread it may not know they have it. It's called whooping cough, and the CDC recommends everyone, including those around babies, make sure their whooping cough vaccination is up to date. Understand the danger your new grandchild faces. Talk to your doctor or pharmacist about you and your family getting a whooping cough vaccination today.
Okay, so a few things to say. First of all, I've been reading this book called Vaccines, Amen by Aaron Siri. And through reading this, I kind of recognized, some of the topics that we talked about a lot during COVID, like, does the vaccine stop transmission? These were conversations that were happening in a very niche audience, pre-COVID. And COVID alerted a lot of people to this. So I'm just going to read you a section from this book. And this is essentially in June 22nd of 2018, there was a consensus conference regarding pertussis vaccine. It was organized by the World Association for Infectious Disease and Immunological Disorders. Now, in a consensus paper published after the conference, authored by 16 pertussis experts together with the World Association for Infectious Disease, they said in no uncertain terms, natural infection evokes mucosal and systemic immune responses, while these acellular pertussis vaccines induce only systemic immune response. Mucosal immunity is essential to prevent colonization and transmission of B. pertussis organisms. Consequently, preventive vaccine measures such as APVs do not induce a valid mucosal response and can prevent disease but not avoid infection and transmission. Not avoid infection and transmission. APV pertussis vaccines do not prevent colonization. Consequently, they do not reduce the circulation of B. pertussis and do not exert any herd immunity effect. End quote.
Highly contagious disease. It can be especially serious, even fatal to infants. Unfortunately, many people who spread it may not know they have it. It's called...
Okay, why would someone spread it and not know they have it? It's because they're not having symptoms. If you're like me and grandma has a bad cough, grandma is self-conscious enough to not go and cough on the infant. But if you take the pertussis vaccine, you're less likely to get that cough, which is the signal to society that you're sick. So you're more likely to spread it. And that's why this is the most disingenuous pharma commercial of all time. Because ultimately, it's the vaccine itself that is creating the situation where it's more likely to be spread because grandma doesn't know that she have whooping cough. And whooping cough's pretty obvious with that certain cough that you
may
get.
Not know they have it. It's called whooping cough, and the CDC recommends everyone, including those around babies, make sure their whooping cough vaccination is up to date. Understand the danger your new grandchild faces. Talk to your doctor.
For those of you listening online who can't see this, the visuals are a wolf, like grandma as a wolf breathing, in front of the infant. And this is awful, right? And one of the reasons why I completely changed my life and moved to the country, started my own education organization with a bunch of other parents, and sort of opted out of school together is because I saw straight away in COVID that COVID was being, the way that kids and the way that school was being run, it was teaching the kids that they were going to kill grandma, that they, by coming to school and by circulating viruses, they were going to kill grandma of COVID. And whether or not that's true, think about the implications for the mental health of those children for the rest of their life. This is a very, very murky waters that we're treading into if we're going to convince kids and convince parents that their kids are a vector of illness primarily, not a vector of love, not a vector of being together with their, with community, not a vector of all the things that we want kids to grow up thinking they are: joy, love, engagement, participation, all of these other things, that you are primarily a vector of infectious disease. And ultimately, all of that proved to be kind of a farce anyway when it showed that the COVID vaccines didn't prevent transmission. And it was never tested for transmission. And so much of the languaging was all about protecting the herd immunity. And ultimately, what does cause herd immunity is getting COVID, right? Because of the mucosal immunity. And so, the reason why this commercial came down is because ICANN sued them to say, alleging, among other things, claims for consumer fraud and false advertising. They served the lawsuit on July 14, 2020. By mid-September, the entire campaign were taken down. They also said you should receive a booster at least 2 weeks before having close contact with an infant. After filing the lawsuit, the statement was scrubbed. Classic pharma. There's really nothing to back up what they're saying, but ultimately they can make a commercial, show a big bad wolf, scare parents into doing something that is more likely going to cause more problems than it solves. Definitely check out this book, Vaccines Amen by Aaron Siri. I think it's required reading for anyone who really wants to understand the history of illness in America and in Europe and in developing countries, and really understand, the role of nutrition, of sanitation, and so forth. So, check that out. All right, we are going to get into the next segment. And every week, we have a new segment. We have a Pharma Ad of the Week. We have Innovation Corner, and we have Clinical Corner. We're going to save the Clinical Corner for last. And I want to talk about Innovation Corner. So as part of our community, we are blessed to have 4 mission partners. I mentioned FullScript before, but Big Boost Marketing was started by my partner at the Evolution of Medicine, Uli Isalo. He was the COO for a number of years there. And he is really the best in the business at understanding how to market the functional medicine practice. And ultimately, one of the things that we have seen as a sort of a trend in the consumerization of healthcare is that instead of people searching for their conditions and their maladies on Google, which is, you've heard the phrase search engine optimization. So you've probably done some work to optimize your practice for search. If someone says functional medicine doctor near me, does your clinic come up? That's the kind of thing that Uli has helped with for the last 10 years. But there's a shift in consumer behavior for the first time in more than a decade, where a lot of people are now going to the AI services to look for practitioners, to research, their conditions, and then go further to find practitioners near them. Now, there are some problems with that. One is that, if you look into, I'm not exactly always sure that the information that comes from AI is accurate or useful or helpful for our community, but certainly it is something that is happening. And so, it might be a good question to see, put into ChatGPT, who is the best functional medicine doctor in your town, or who should I go and see for functional medicine in your town, and see what comes up. I've certainly found that it's a mixed bag. Sometimes you get an answer when you put in something related, to this type of care that's really empowering and exciting. And you think, okay, well, if someone else is putting that information in, I'd be glad for them to see this. And sometimes it doesn't look so great. And so ultimately, what Uli has created is some assets and some tools that can help you navigate this, because ultimately everyone is learning as we go. So he's got a free guide that will essentially help you understand why this matters, where AI tools get their data from, what are the critical factors, and then answer-ready content and creating trust signals that matter. So there's a guide, and I'm going to give you that link. If you go to goevomed.com/bigboostguide, you can download the guide. And then he's also doing a boot camp to essentially help you get organized so that your practice can really understand, how to optimize yourself for AI search optimization. And this is a new way. And ultimately, Uli's already seeing that many of his customers are able to get new patients from AI. So there's some really exciting parts about it, but there are some things that you need to do in order to make sure that you're showing up in the right way. So this is a cool innovation. One of the cool things about having these partners is they are creating awesome stuff that is really relevant for building the functional medicine practice of today, of the future. So check out the guide, download the guide. It's free to check it out. And then if you want to go into Uli's bootcamp, I think it's only $47, and you can upgrade your website with all of the tools that you need in order to be relevant. So check out all those details. And that's Innovation Corner. So before we get into our next segment, this is really about looking at what was the most popular video in the history of the Functional Forum. Now, obviously, videos that started earlier have had more time to rack up views, but there's one video that has had way more views than anything else. And it actually was from an event that we did in February of 2017 at the E-Town in Boulder. I don't know if any of you have been to E-Town, but it is by far the best venue that we ever did a functional forum in. We did a bunch of functional forums there. One, lots of great practitioners in Boulder. Two, it's just an amazing venue for doing the functional forum. 5 cameras. These guys know how to run the whole thing. It's just very easy to do that. So I love E-Town. But in that session, we had talks from Janet Settle and Will Vanderveer. Since then, Will Vanderveer has become a great leader in the sort of cross-section of psychiatry and psychedelics. And he has a great organization that is educating mental health professionals in the use of psychedelics and integrative psychiatry generally. And so I love Will, and he spoke that night. But the talk that I'm referring to was by Dr. Isabella Wentz. So she is a PharmD. She was one of the first sort of functional pharmacists to become famous in our space. And she's written a number of books. She's made a lot of content about thyroid health. In fact, she has a new book that's just coming out all about IBS that's coming out right about now when this came out. This talk that she gave, I want to give a shout out to because, I think this resonated with people. I think first of all, it resonated way beyond the functional medicine audience. Like we don't have 500,000 doctors watching this. So who is watching it? I'm sure that there's many, many people out there who have had symptoms of mental illness. And now they recognize that there must have been a deeper cause. And so this talk is called The Misdiagnosis Machine: How Thyroid Problems Mimic the Symptoms of Mental Illness. And I think there's so much to learn for all practitioners here because ultimately this speaks to the power of the root cause diagnosis. Like, do you know to what degree the thyroid is having an effect on, your mental health? And I think that, this is one of the reasons why I believe that, the integrative functional medicine, why I think the Integrated Medicine for Mental Health conference that we went to a month ago was extremely valuable because it's teaching mental health professionals about all of the different root causes. And there's many, and thyroid is just one. So enjoy with me, Dr. Isabella Wentz, The Misdiagnosis Machine: How Thyroid Problems Mimic the Symptoms of Mental Illness. Enjoy. Please welcome Boulder, not native, but currently Boulder citizen, Dr. Isabella Wentz.
Say oh, you say I say revolution, and you say ja. I say no, oh, you say I say revolution, and you say ja, 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 ja.
So, I have a confession to make. I haven't always been interested in the thyroid gland, especially not during pharmacy school. I thought that thyroid disease was just something that everybody got once they got older. And quite frankly, at the pharmacy, when I was dispensing tons of thyroid hormones, I never quite understood why people kept complaining about symptoms when they were already taking medications. It wasn't until I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis in 2009, after almost a decade of some pretty debilitating symptoms. So today I'm going to share with you a little bit more about thyroid disease and how we can address it, as well as how it can masquerade as mental illness. So I'm 18 years old. I am coming out of my freshman year in college, and I go home for the summer. I'm a little bit beat down and a little bit depressed. And one of the reasons was because I missed my final exam in chemistry. Now, this probably wasn't that unusual that a college student would miss a final exam, except for me, that was really unusual because I was, a straight A student. I was a very type A person, and I got my stuff done, right? Yet, I missed my 9 a.m. exam. And the other part of it was that I just laid down to take a nap at 3 p.m. the day before. And so, what was at the root cause of my fatigue? Right? I go home for the summer with my tail between my legs. I'm going back to the Chicago suburbs where I'm from, and my parents just didn't see the same Isabella again. They said, wow, you don't really care about much of the things you used to care about. You are sleeping all the time. You are, you're forgetting stuff. What's going on with you? And so, as any loving parents would do, they sent me to a psychiatrist, right? And I was diagnosed with severe depression, very severe depression. Like, they were concerned about me, and they were, they wanted to put me on suicide watch because they were so concerned with what was going on with me. Now, going back to my health history and my health timeline, what was going on before I got sick, right? Before I started having all these symptoms. And of course, I think I had a couple of boyfriends break up with me, so that always happens in college, and I missed an exam, and that was very, very hard for me. But I also had the Epstein-Barr virus, or mono. And that is a known trigger for thyroid disease, and that set me on a path of misdiagnosis for almost a decade. I was misdiagnosed with panic attacks. I was misdiagnosed with anxiety. I was misdiagnosed with major depressive disorder. And this is what happens to people with thyroid disease. They're told that they're either crazy, perhaps that they're lazy, like I was because I was sleeping all the time, and sometimes they're just told that they're fat, right? Because they can't seem to pull off the weight no matter what they do. And so, many times, some of the root causes of thyroid disease may actually be, some of the root causes of mental health illness and mental health symptoms may actually be due to thyroid disease. When we are all taught in schools, if nursing school, pharmacy school, medical school, we get this picture of a woman, right? This is probably like something you've seen in a textbook before, where half of her is hypothyroid and the other half is hyperthyroid. And so you have this woman that is dealing with symptoms, and one half of it is, hypothyroid, so you've got the sluggish metabolism, you've got the hair loss, you've got the brain fog, and you've got the weight gain, right? And then on the other half, you have somebody who's hyperthyroid, so you've got palpitations, you've got panic attacks, anxiety disorders, the bulging eyes, and, just overall, like, speeding up of things. But the truth is, usually, this is an advanced stage for people. And most people who have Hashimoto's, which is what I had, might have symptoms from both sides. So I not only had a sluggish brain, but I also had anxiety. I not only had weight loss, that was actually my symptom, but I also had the brain fog, and I also had the cold intolerance. And it was, missed for many, many years. So I kept getting the same kind of runaround. So, I think it's in your head. Maybe you need antidepressants. Maybe you need anti-anxiety medications. I think you're just getting older. I was 25 at the time, so. Yeah, and this is the message that most people get. Now, when I first got diagnosed with Hashimoto's, it was 2009, and my symptoms started in 2000. This is my loving husband, Michael, who's been with me, supporting me all along the way. And when I first got home from getting my diagnosis, I go, I have Hashimoto's, and Michael said, that sounds like an exotic Japanese sword fighter, like, what's going on, right? But this condition, this autoimmune condition that happens to impact the thyroid gland is actually quite common. So studies have shown that up to 27% of our population actually has Hashimoto's when using advanced diagnostic methods. Now, during those 9 years, when I struggled to get a diagnosis, I would go, every year I was a good girl, and I was like, very concerned about my health. I was a pharmacy student, and I thought I had every condition, right? Because that's what you do when you're going through school. But I kept getting the same tests done, and all of them were normal. One of the reasons is that the TSH test is not going to be elevated until somebody's had thyroid disease for quite some time. The other reason, of course, was that the interpretation of the test was lacking back in the day. So we now know that most people feel best with a TSH between 0.5 and 2. And mine was 4.5, and I have this wonderful report that says your thyroid is normal, yet I was sleeping for 12 hours a night, right? And I used to call myself, those were my sloth days, right? And we also know that this condition impacts 5 to 8 women for every 1 man that's impacted. And I have a theory about this. It's my safety theory of autoimmune thyroid disease, because quite frankly, it's not safe to be a woman in our world. As the doctors were talking about, when you have a history of trauma and you have this is a potential root cause of thyroid disease, these are things that are going to set you on a cascade of abnormal thyroid hormone levels later on in life. The other thing to consider is that most people who are seeking your care are likely to have the general population statistics are 27% when you use advanced diagnostic methods like thyroid antibodies or using a fine needle aspiration biopsy to diagnose Hashimoto's. But the truth is that many of the people presenting to healthcare professionals and trying to get healthcare services, that percentage of thyroid disease is going to be much higher in them. And one of my friends, Trudy Scott, she's a wonderful functional nutritionist, and she specializes in anxiety. And she says that anywhere from 50 to 60% of her clients with anxiety actually have thyroid antibodies. So one important thing to note with Hashimoto's is that it's not like black and white. It's not like you just have it full blown or you don't have it. There's actually 5 stages to Hashimoto's. In the first stage, for all intents and purposes, your thyroid function is normal, your immune system function is normal, and you're not going to have any symptoms, right? This is just the genetic predisposition. The second stage is when things start to change. So we start seeing an infiltration of white blood cells right into the thyroid gland. And people can start seeing changes in thyroid antibodies. So you might see thyroglobulin antibodies or thyroid peroxidase antibodies in this stage, but the TSH will still be normal. The other interesting thing is there's also seronegative Hashimoto's. So some people don't even have thyroid antibodies, and doing a thyroid ultrasound or a biopsy might be another way to find thyroid disease. But really, unless you biopsy every single cell within the thyroid gland, you can't tell if there's white blood cells in there. So it's really not something you can necessarily exclude by doing thyroid antibody tests. The other thing is, in this stage, there's just beginning attack of the thyroid gland, so the thyroid tissue may still be intact, but the body's already compensating. And this is when we start seeing symptoms. So people in this stage are going to have the panic attacks. There's multiple studies on the different types of symptoms that are correlated in this stage: obsessive compulsive disorder, panic attacks, anxiety. One of my favorite one was health-seeking behavior, hypochondria, right? And a lot of times, and traveling the country the last year or so, I've interviewed over 60 patients with thyroid disease. And through my platform, The Thyroid Pharmacist, I have over 300,000 people that follow me online, my clients and whatnot, and they all share the same stories with me, is like they were going to get care. They were trying to seek the help, but people were just telling them that there was, you're crazy, here's an antidepressant. There's, you're just fat, you have fork and mouth disease, you need to eat less. These are true stories, right? And then that's stage 2. Now, if you can get a person diagnosed in this stage, you can prevent a lifetime of fork-to-mouth disease. You can prevent a lifetime of depression. And you can also prevent the need for thyroid hormones or thyroid medications, because you can, while we have some technologies that can reverse and accelerate tissue healing, it's much easier to prevent damage on a thyroid gland than it is to regrow new tissue. Stage 3 is when more progressive doctors are starting to diagnose people where a person will have subclinical hypothyroidism, and they will also have slightly elevated TSH, and then they will have, the thyroid antibodies or not. And at this point, we start seeing more and more symptoms. We know that treating people with thyroid hormones at this stage can also be helpful. For pregnant women, this is usually a must, but in the conventional world, whenever a woman who's not pregnant comes in with a TSH, 6, 7, or 8, she's told to wait and watch. To wait and watch for what, right? For it to get worse? And so stage 4 is overt hypothyroidism. This is when most people get diagnosed, right? And at this point, they are prescribed a medication. I think we all know the brand name levothyroxine. It was the #1 prescribed drug in 2 out of the last 3 years. It finally got beat out by Vicodin last year, right? And this is something that they're getting, but many of them continue to have symptoms with this medication, and they're told, oh, well, your thyroid's got nothing to do with your hair loss, your thyroid's got nothing to do with your weight gain, and your thyroid has nothing to do with your depression. And the scariest part is that this medication is not only, it doesn't really help the symptoms that it's supposed to treat, but it also doesn't stop the progression of the condition. So we know that Hashimoto's, like every autoimmune condition, is progressive. And so stage 5 is when we start seeing progression to other types of autoimmune conditions. I've talked to so many people around the world who were good girls. They took their thyroid medications. They did everything their doctors said. And then they were diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis or lupus or another type of autoimmune condition because the root cause, the trigger, was still there. Nobody was doing anything about it. And so just a quick summary. So people have symptoms. And a lot of times they're misdiagnosed with mental health issues when they have thyroid antibodies. And this is going to be you might not see any changes on the TSH. You might just see these changes when you do thyroid antibody tests. And so these are some of the antibodies to do for thyroid peroxidase, thyroid globulin, TSI, and TSH receptor antibodies. So going over a lot of the symptoms, we talked about some of the symptoms that can be caused. And traditionally, people associated hypothyroidism with many of these symptoms, with one set of symptoms, and hyperthyroidism with another set of symptoms. But the truth is, when you have Hashimoto's, what's happening is as the body starts to attack the thyroid gland, we start seeing a big rush of thyroid hormones into the bloodstream. And this actually causes a transient hyperthyroidism. And so you will have a person who has symptoms of both an overactive and an underactive thyroid. And I could tell you personally, it's no picnic, right? So you end up with having anxiety and panic attacks on one hand, and then you end up, once the hormone gets cleared out of your body, you might have depression, fatigue, apathy. There's a whole bunch of different conditions that can be traced back to thyroid disease. I'm not saying that thyroid disease causes every single mental health symptom and condition. Of course, that would be ridiculous. But there's a significant percentage of people who have, postpartum thyroiditis, and that presents as postpartum depression. Or they have depression that can actually be resolved when treating the thyroid gland. Bipolar disorder, there's a big percentage of people with bipolar disorder who actually have thyroid antibodies. I don't think this is really appreciated. People don't realize the effect of thyroid antibodies on the brain. except for in the case of Hashimoto's encephalopathy. But, of course, this is a very extreme case. As far as psychotropic medications go, oftentimes, I'll see, when I used to work at the pharmacy, it was like, okay, here's your birth control, your antidepressant, and your thyroid med. It was just pretty much, we had this like fast mover section in the pharmacy that was like right up front, all the medications we commonly use. And that was just like, okay, they're all right here. I can just pull them all real quickly. Here we go, right? Because commonly women will be placed on all these different medications. And a lot of times they may actually exacerbate some of the symptoms or even mask the condition. So medications that affect dopamines can actually suppress TSH. And so if a person was on, let's say, Wellbutrin, and if they were going to get their TSH tested, it may be falsely suppressed. So you might miss a thyroid condition then. We know with lithium has very unfortunate relationship with the thyroid gland. And that's one of the really big things when you have a person on a lithium. As pharmacists, we were always taught to monitor their thyroid function because lithium can actually bring new onset thyroid disease or can exacerbate existing thyroid disease. Antipsychotic medications. So I used to be before I became the thyroid pharmacist, I was a consultant pharmacist in mental health. And one of my biggest jobs was actually to get people off of antipsychotic drugs because of the harmful metabolic effects they had. And I can't get this statistic anywhere, but there was somebody that said that, like taking an antipsychotic drug is like eating 3 extra cheeseburgers a day, right? Because of their impact on the metabolism. Now, if you give somebody a highly sedating medication that makes them gain weight and they already have thyroid disease, like you're really not doing them much of a service. And of course, benzos and SSRIs, these are commonly given to people with thyroid disease, and they really don't help in many cases. So studies have shown, like the STAR-D trial, that these medications are not super effective, and especially if you have a thyroid condition, they're not going to be all that effective as well. So what are the helpful interventions for people with thyroid disease? Well, obviously thyroid hormones, right? And so, in pharmacology, we call T4 and medications that need to be activated into the body, into other medications as prodrugs. And so T4, which is levothyroxine, the most commonly prescribed drug, is actually a prodrug. So it needs to be turned into, it needs to be activated in the body to work properly. And T3 is the more active version. And we see that people oftentimes will continue to struggle with thyroid symptoms when they're on this medication. So one, kind of crazy thing you can do is you can actually give them T3 directly, and that helps. That really helps some people resolve their symptoms. So people will say, wow, I started taking this medication, whether it's T3 directly in addition to the T4 or natural desiccated thyroid, but they'll say, wow, I am not changing up my exercise routine, but I'm losing more weight and I feel better and my hair's growing back and my skin's nicer and I'm not as tired anymore. Of course, it doesn't stop there. Selenium supplements. So selenium supplement can be very, very helpful for people with thyroid disease. Selenium deficiency has been identified as a big potential root cause of thyroid disease. And anywhere from 200 to 400 micrograms of selenium methionine has been shown to reduce thyroid antibodies by about half over the course of 3 months. The other cool thing that happens is a lot of times people's anxiety goes away or reduces when they have Hashimoto's and their antibodies start reducing. So this is something that can be very helpful, and it's also helpful for postpartum thyroiditis. It's helpful for Graves' disease as well. Myo-inositol is also a helpful intervention for a person who has, OCD-like symptoms as well as thyroid disease. They can go hand in hand. There was one study done a little while ago that showed using myo-inositol in combination with selenium helped to reduce not just thyroid antibodies, which actually helped to put some people on their remission range, but also helped to reduce TSH. And I did a survey of my readers in 2015, and I asked them about some of the most helpful interventions. And I broke it down into all kinds of classes and, what helped most for what. And these were the actual interventions that people thought were most helpful for their mood-related symptoms with thyroid disease. And so balancing blood sugar. Wow, can you see some miracles when somebody eats blood sugar stable meals, right? Gluten-free or paleo diet. My mom just sent me an article the other day, and it was like, people are on the gluten-free diet when they shouldn't be. Like this crazy woman said she's on it for Hashimoto's, and I was like fuming in my little shoes because in my survey of over 2,000 readers and just in my work with clients, 88% of them feel better gluten-free when they have Hashimoto's. And what's crazy is in asking them which interventions helped most and least, and I don't have time to go through all these stats with you guys, but the gluten-free diet was actually more helpful for mood, for weight, as well as for energy, which are the top 3 thyroid symptoms people experience compared to thyroid medications. It's like, wow. Paleo diet can be very, very helpful as well. And then autoimmune paleo diet is another really helpful intervention where we see nodules shrinking, when we see people, becoming brand new people when they change their nutrition. Acupuncture, sauna therapy, massage therapy, and adrenal adaptogens. These are some of the other things that people say, this really helped my mood with thyroid disease. And so I always like to think about root causes. So sometimes, mood alterations can be caused by thyroid disease, right? But then what causes thyroid disease? And I like to look at the functional medicine approach, of course, when we look at food sensitivities. So gluten, dairy, and soy are the top reactive foods for people with thyroid conditions. Nutrient depletions, selenium, thiamine, magnesium, ferritin, as well as vitamin D are some of the common nutrient deficiencies. Chronic infections, Epstein-Barr virus, H. pylori, blastocystis hominis, various kinds of parasites, SIBO, all of these things can actually trigger thyroid disease. And in some cases, when you get a person treated for these, the person can go into remission. It's amazing. It's like, well, this was the cause, right? Of course, impaired stress response. So there's a huge connection, and I think, as everybody in this room is aware, to traumatic events and causing chronic illness, and thyroid disease is no different. Things like social rejection can actually bring on thyroid disease. There's a study of this little rat study that was done in, there was a little rat family, mama and papa rat, in their little home with their little rat children, and scientists decided to drop an intruder rat, right in that cage and see what happened, right? And of course, the intruder rat immediately got attacked by papa rat and was defeated. And then that didn't feel very, very pleasant for the intruder rat, and so they decided to measure that rat's thyroid hormones right after, and guess what? They were altered, right? Prisoners of war have altered thyroid hormone profiles. And, it's anywhere from the extreme. It could be from a Mean Girls experience in high school, or it can be from something as extreme as having trauma, very, very serious, significant trauma in your life. Of course, intestinal permeability is a common root cause. So that's something that's huge. Thyroid cells are actually made from the same fetal organs as gut cells are, and a lot of times we'll see when we address gut symptoms, we see thyroid symptoms improve. And then toxins, really simple things like getting a fluoride filter can be really, really helpful for people, and getting them to stop using their antibacterial soaps. So triclosan was recently banned by the FDA for having a thyroid hormone disruption. And I think about, poor people with OCD and using all of their antibacterial soaps, right? And it's like a vicious cycle. So I'd love to get into with you guys a little bit deeper about everything related to thyroid disease. I have a few resources to offer. So my Hashimoto's The Root Cause book that came out in 2013, it's a New York Times bestseller. We've got thousands of patients that have now reviewed it. And this is something that you can give to them. They can take this and they'll be on board with functional medicine once they read this. So the best emails I get are from doctors that say, hey, I had a patient come in with your book and they're actually asking me to do functional medicine testing. They're actually asking me to do more testing, and it gets them motivated and gets them on board. My new book is coming out March 28th, Hashimoto's Protocol. And then the Thyroid Secret documentary series that's coming out on March 1st. And in this series, we have 9 episodes that go through misdiagnosis, they go through postpartum thyroid issues, and help take people back on a recovery to get their health back. Episode 2 is actually focused on mental health and misdiagnosis as well. So I think you guys will be especially interested in that. That's all I have for you guys, but if I could leave you with one closing thing, that if you have a person who is fatigued, who is sleeping a lot, think about their thyroid. Don't always say, like, this person must be depressed. Even if they are, quote unquote, having mood alterations, think about the thyroid.
All right, I hope you enjoyed that. I think there's a lot to learn there. Hopefully you got something from it, and maybe this is useful information to send out to, patients in your community, or something that you can use for education. Ultimately, the goal here with the Functional Forum was always to make it aspirational to be a functional medicine practitioner. I think Isabella does a great job of doing that. We've seen a huge growth in pharmacists being interested in functional medicine. Big shout out to my friend Lauren Castle, who organizes the Functional Pharmacists Alliance. And, I think many pharmacists around the country whose businesses are closing because pharmacy is a very difficult business if you only sell drugs, are realizing that the best thing that you could have done if you were a pharmacist, an independent pharmacist, is to create health. And those pharmacists that have been creating health for the last few decades, have thriving businesses because they're not just selling drugs, and that business became very uncompetitive. And there's a huge opportunity for pharmacists to be at the front lines of building health in their community. They've got so much trust, they've got so much knowledge. And so if you're interested in finding out more, reach out to Lauren. We'd love to hear from you. I'd also like to say, look, if you're in the process of building a practice and you'd like to start a new practice, or you'd like to, work on building a practice, we are now making our calls available again. So these concierge calls we started back in 2014, where we met with practitioners who were on the journey to really try and understand how, their vision. And we must have done thousands of those calls between 2014 and 2025. And so we are excited to be doing those. I'm going to be making myself available for some of those calls. So if you are interested in getting on a concierge call, go to goevomed.com/concierge. And you might get on with me, you might get on someone with our team, and ultimately we'll be able to help you find where you need to go. I do want to mention, before we leave, a couple of our mission partners. Last time you heard about Freedom Practice Coaching Scalability Assessment. We've had hundreds of practitioners go through that process and find tremendous value from understanding where they are. Are they in the startup phase? Are they in the growth phase? If you make decisions that make you where you think you're in the growth phase, but you're in the startup phase, it will be a disaster. And so go to the scalability assessment. It's goevomed.com/scalability. You can take that assessment. It takes 15 to 20 minutes. Highly recommend that. And also TrueNeura. So TrueNeura is, if you were to start a practice, use TrueNeura and take in a patient in the same way that Isabella is talking about there, you would be able to very clearly see the thyroid hormones. Are they out of balance? Are they contributing to the dysfunction? And so if you go to trueneura.com/demo, you can get a demo of that software. TrueNeura really brings all these things together, everything that we've spoken about here today, to be able to build a practice that has the technological bells and whistles that patients are going to expect from being with Aura, being with Whoop, being with Function Health, being with Superpower. You can have that superpower for your practice right now with TrueNeura, especially if you're interested in building a practice around cognitive decline. So go to TrueNeura, TrueNeura.com/demo. All right. So here we are. This has been episode 2. If you like this, please share it with your community. Please share it with other practitioners that need to hear it. We're very excited about the relaunch of the Evolution of Medicine podcast. Hopefully this is valuable for you. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you have questions, concerns, we're going to start some new email addresses so that you can get in touch with us. Let us know, what you'd like to see in the future, who you'd like to hear from, topics you'd like to get into. We are going to go deeper into a lot of topics that we've only skimmed the surface of. We're going to talk about psychosocial health. We're going to talk about psychedelics. We're going to talk about, do people's symptoms serve a function for them? Is this something that they are getting something out of? And this really speaks to, understanding the psychology of disease. We're going to get into all more of that. And Anything else you'd like to hear about here at the Evolution of Medicine, be glad to hear from you. This has been the Evolution of Medicine podcast, Season 2, Episode 2. I'm your host, James Maskell. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.